Welcome back to another Position Zero video. Today, I put the absolute worst bots on chess.com in the game with each other. However, the bot Zach, which is by far not even close the worst bot on chess.com, I gave it a full bottom row of queens. And Martin, which was the old worst bot, I gave a normal set of pieces. Now, if you look to your right, you could see that this game ends in 16 moves. So, this game is terrible. I have another game ready because this game was so bad. But, so, Martin started off as b4, which generally you'd rather go here or play like a modern opening or something. But no, he just goes b4. Zach plays d5, which... It's fine. It's a good move. Martin plays f3, and Zach gets really aggressive in the beginning, and it attacks White's knight, which is obviously defended a lot. So a pawn pushes on e3 for Martin, and I can't even explain the move f5. I guess the idea is to defend the queen from literally nothing. But White immediately gets aggressive. It attacks Black's king, and Black defends with the queen. Not a bad move considering you have a full bottom row of queens, and taking out the bishop for White is genuinely good for Black. White takes, but Black goes f7. It completely ignores the idea of taking the bishop, which it's something. And then White immediately tries to go insanely aggressive. It does a fork on the king and the queen here, and the king has to move, so it moves here. Now, not only does this enable White to take the queen, it also enables another check on Black's king, which Martin actually does see. So Martin's actually played really well so far. Well, Zach decided not to take back a bishop he should have taken back. The Black king moves to g5, and White is really getting aggressive now. This pawn is defended by the rook, and White is giving a lot of checks with the idea to gain as much material as possible. Black plays h5. Now, Martin doesn't necessarily see mate in 3, and sometimes even I can't because I'm not that good at chess. But Black did really bad that there's already a mate in 3, which shows you just how bad Zach is and how he's programmed to do literally the worst moves possible. White gives a discovered check with the queen, which makes Black back in the game technically. But Black goes to h6, and then White decides to do the pawn move d4. I don't hate it, but it's interesting. This queen just shuffles and tries to sack itself for the bishop. And all of a sudden, the position is completely even according to the eval bar, despite Zach being up 14 points of material. This White pawn pushes and to e4, giving a discovered check with the bishop. Black blocks with its f4 pawn. White takes, and Black blocks again with the g5 pawn. But instead of taking, the White queen goes to g4, which I guess the idea is trying to look for a checkmate. But in this position, Black just goes insane. It takes on e5 with the knight, and there's a mate in 5 in this position. Of course, Martin's not going to spot that, but bishop takes, and now there's a mate in 4, and Black completely goes out the window and goes b6 with his pawn. Not a good move to try to prevent this checkmate. He just does it. And then White takes, and then it's a mate in 1 for White. Black goes to g6, and Martin doesn't miss mate in 1, and the game's over just like that. 16 moves with Zach having a full back row of queens. And the game's over. Martin wins. Now, I wasn't just going to let the game end off like that. I am going to give another round. But this time, I gave Martin one rook. Only a single rook. And I gave Zach a full normal army. This game was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. You can't describe this game. And I will do another game in a new video where I'll give Martin a pawn only. But the game kicks off with Martin going to h2 and Zach going f6. Martin shuffles back a lot with his rook. Now it's on e2. There's not going to be much perspectives to see on Martin's side, really. But Zach goes p5. The king slides to f2. And Zach is just randomly pushing pawns, not trying to develop his pieces and give a checkmate. Yeah. The rook randomly just decides it doesn't want to exist. It goes to e4. There's a mate in 11 now. Which, I can't describe this. But of course, Zach would never take. He goes h6. And we have this weird position where Zach is giving a bunch of random checks, which Martin, for some reason, doesn't take and avoids. So far, Martin's playing a lot worse than he did last game. The black pawn moves to e5. White takes, because suddenly the rook is activated, and it realizes that there's literally nothing looking at that pawn, and it can potentially grab another pawn. Black blocks with the bishop, a sensible move. And the king, he doesn't take, but he moves his king down, maybe preparing to take. Black moves to a6, and the white king moves back here to d4. This game goes like h7. h7 legitimately doesn't do anything. Like, from my perspective. What does this develop? The rook can't escape right now. You would have to develop the knight, you'd have to move the pawn, and then you could only get your rook into a position where it's useful. This legitimately is just wasting a move. White's rook goes to h5. I'm not sure what Martin's doing right now. Martin did manage to grab a pawn. Okay. Next move is c5. Checking white. White king retreats. Now, ignoring that there's a mate in 6 on this board, completely, like, ignoring that fact at all, black goes to e7. Okay? And then white's king is running away from black's position. That's almost looking like it's trying to defend its king rather than attack the opponent's king. Oh my god. This is just terrible. And then the white knight goes to b4. It's finally somewhat activating itself, chasing the white king. The rook slides over and takes b5. Martin is doing something sensible. This pawn goes to d6. And Martin is really doing good. He took the free knight. White is barely alive, but it's alive. Black begins checking. And now it looks a bit concerning. And look at the eval bar. It's a mate in 7 for black again. White moves to f2. It's still a mate in 7. c6. Still a mate in 7. Now it's a mate in 6 because white decides it wants to go to g1. And then the black king is moving now. So it doesn't develop any of its actual pieces. It develops its king. f4. Martin is awake and alive. He's checking. He's taking hanging pieces. He's doing his thing. Black retreats. And Martin takes the free bishop. Martin is doing good. he runs away. He saw the threat of the Black King. And all of a sudden, Black sacrifices its queen to give a check. Martin does take, but of course Black doesn't take back. It goes to g4. White rook goes here. I'm assuming the idea is to try to gain, not the bishop, but I'm sure Martin, from its perspective, saw that it could take something. The knight develops to f6. Okay. And Martin saw his chance. The knight left the bishop, and Martin took it. Now, it was up over 33 points of material like 30 seconds ago. Now Black's only at 13 points of material. The Black King shuffles to f4, and the White King just follows it while they have like this intense stare down for no particular reason at all. The Black Rook decides to just align with the other Black Rook for no reason also. They don't really do anything until this pawn moves. And White again takes the advantage and wins the A pawn. And then, this is insane. You can't understand what Black was trying to do in this position. The only thing is, Zach assumed that this rook was hanging and he created an attack on it. As if the rook couldn't look back at the Black King, but that's besides the point. White takes, and the knight decides to just die at this point. It doesn't know what to do. But instead of taking the free knight, White checks, and Black goes to g3. The rook moves to d4. The Black King moves to h2. And in this position, after White plays f4, Black hangs mate in 1 with the move h1. It lost all of its it lost over 25 points of material. And after all of that, he decides just to end it off with White winning. It was done. It sacrificed all of its pieces. I mean, it still has so much more material with 4 pawns and a knight and rook. But that's besides the point. It lost 25 points of material, and White checkmated Black because Martin doesn't miss mate in 1. Now, Martin absolutely destroyed Zach, even with Zach's advantages I gave him in both games. So in a future video, I will give Zach a bunch of queens and Martin a single pawn. Martin himself will get a single pawn. Martin himself will be the Grandmaster against Zach. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. Bye.